I'm Ian Grieve, Consultant with Perfect Image Limited and Microsoft Dynamics GP Specialist. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course. Section 1. Logging in and User Customization. In this section we're going to take a look at logging in with Remember User and Password, customizing the home page, using visual cues, creating navigation pane shortcuts, and configuring user preferences. In this section we're going to take a look at logging in and user customizations of Dynamics GP. In this first video we're going to have a look at logging into the system using the new Remember User and Password feature introduced in Dynamics GP 2010. As you can see on the login screen here, we have the usual prompts for server, user ID and password. We also have one for Remember User and Password. This option is disabled by default, but can be enabled in the system preferences. So we'll log in and do that now, but just a caution first. If you're running a system where clients are shared between users, this option should not be enabled, otherwise all users will be logged in on that machine as the client who first checks the box and fills the details in. If you're operating in a single user client environment, this option can be quite useful for speeding up people getting into the system. It's enabled via the administration series under Setup, System, System Preferences. In this window, at the bottom, there's a Remember User section with an Enable Remember User checkbox. If we check this and save the form away, and then we click on Change User, we can enter the user ID, password, and we can now select the option for Remember User and Password. So next time we log in on this client machine, we will not need to supply the user ID or password. We say OK. On the company login form, we can select a company, and we can now also click Remember this company. This particular checkbox is independent of the system preference and is always available, regardless of whether or not you're remembering user and password, but combined with the other setting can make getting into the most commonly used company an easy task. If we accept this, I'll log into the company again. And just to show it working, I want to close GP down and then reopen a new instance, and it will appear to take longer to log in than usual, but it's applying the username and password and then the required company in the background. If we decide to change the company, which is our default company, or we don't want to log into one automatically anymore, if we select Change Company, we can either change the company and check the box against the new company, or we can make sure the checkbox is disabled entirely and say OK, and next time we log in, we'll need to pick the company that we want to access. Likewise, we can disable the Remember User and Password field as well by logging in again by supplying the credentials and unchecking the Remember User and Password checkbox. So from this point on, neither the username, the password, nor the company will be remembered. In the next video, we'll take a look at customizing the home page. In the last video, we took a look at logging into Dynamics GP using the Remember User and Password feature. In this one, we're going to take a look at customizing the home page. When a new user is created, a home page role can be assigned. If this isn't done, the first time the user logs into GP, they get to choose one for themselves. This is what I'm going to do by logging in as Ian G, who is a new user who hasn't yet logged in. So when the username and company is picked, we'll log into the system, and we get presented with the Select Homepage dialog. In here we can pick an industry and a role that matches the job that we do in Dynamics GP. For example, if I pick Retail and Accounts Payable, I'll be presented with a home page which focuses on these sort of tasks. If I was to pick a bookkeeper, there is a different set of tasks, so different options will be displayed on the home page. As a demonstration, I'll pick the Accounts Payable and say OK, and the home page will be displayed as a default home page for this particular role, which shows a to-do section containing reminders and tasks, a section called My Reports, which I can add commonly used reports to, integration to Microsoft Outlook to show the number of unread messages and calendar appointments, the Microsoft Connect link to the Dynamics GP Community web portal, a section of quick links, and some metrics displaying KPIs. If SSRS is installed, the metrics can be replaced with custom KPIs created. Each section can be modified by clicking on the Change Details icon, which is represented by a pencil. If we drill into there, we can change which options are displayed. So for example, we could switch off tasks. We say OK there and then refresh the home page. The tasks section has disappeared from To Do. Additionally, if we go into the Change Details, we can use the blue expansion arrow to change reminder preferences. So we can include additional items to be reminded of, and then say how many days it should be before the reminder is displayed. We can also add custom reminders using smart lists. Again, if we hit refresh, the reminders will be refreshed. Each section has change details available to it, so in Outlook I can switch off the inbox summary, switch off the calendar, or can increase the number of days displayed from the calendar. In the top right of the home page, there's a Customize This Page link, which takes us into the Customize Homepage dialog. And in here, we can choose to entirely disable certain sections. So we could remove Connect from the home page entirely. We can also move the sections around the home page. So for example, we can move Outlook to the top of column 2 and put metrics in the middle of column 1. If we say OK, the home page automatically refreshes to show the new layout. Also in Customize This Page, we can drill into each section, so we can change the metrics which are displayed by moving them to the metrics to display side, or we can reorder them, so we could choose to see gross profit for the last 12 months first. We can also click on the Change Role button. If we've customized the home page and want to reset it to a default, clicking Change Role will warn us that any customizations that have been made to the quick links, metrics, or Office Outlook areas on the home page will be removed if you change roles. And that shows us the select home page role that we would have first seen the first time we log into GP. So that's a quick run through on how to customize the home page. In the next video, we'll take a look at using visual cues for reminders. In the last video, we took a look at customizing the home page by moving elements around or switching them on and off depending on what we wanted to see. In this video, we're going to take a look at the To Do section and the new visual cue functionality introduced in Dynamics GP 2010. A visual cue is a way of changing the text links, such as payables due, to an image to make it a bit more graphical and stand out more from the background of the screen. To do this, what we do is we select the Change Details button on the To Do section, which takes us to Do Details, and we can then drill into the Reminders section using the expansion button. And the predefined reminders, the one we're going to change first, is the payables due. And as you can see, there's a checkbox at the side for displays a queue. If we select that and then say OK and refresh using the refresh button next to the address bar, when the home page refreshes up, there's a little stack of papers with 197 next to it for the payables due. So more graphical reminder of what we're looking at. If we change the details again, we can change some of the custom reminders as well. So for example, past due payables, if we modify this one, you'll see that in this case we can't actually change it because this is a total of column. If I cancel out of there and go to the payables documents on hold, I can modify this and I can select display as queue because this is a number of records. So the one thing to remember about visual cues is you can only enable them when it's a count of records, not a total or a sum. So if I enable display as visual cue here, say OK to that, say OK on the Reminder Preferences window, and refresh the home page, we get a different size document, so it's easy to see where we have a lot of items waiting, where we don't have many others waiting. In the next video, we'll take a look at creating some shortcuts to Windows and external applications. In the last video, we took a look at adding visual cues to the reminders in the to-do section of the home page. In this section, we're going to have a look at using shortcuts stored within the navigation pane of Dynamics GP to make accessing Windows, as well as external applications, websites, and smart lists easier. The first thing to do is just add a folder into the navigation pane to store the shortcuts in. In this case, I'm going to name the folder Financials, and I'm going to add a window from Dynamics GP. And I'm going to add one from the financial module. I'm going to take batch entry, and you'll notice the name has defaulted in from the window name. If I say add and done, that shortcut is now available straight out of the navigation pane. Adding a smart list is just the same, but in this case what I'm going to do is create it in the startup folder, which means that as soon as Dynamics GP opens, this particular smart list will run. In this case I want to take a payables transaction smart list, and I want payables due today. So again, add and done. The smart list report is in the startup folder, so the next time I log in into Dynamics GP, the smart list will start up and automatically run this report. Shortcuts can also be created to external applications such as management reporting. So if we key in the name of the program that we want, then we can browse to the location of the application we want to add and select the exe. We can give it a keyboard shortcut if we want to. I'll just say add and done. We now have a shortcut to Management Reporter with easy access, not having to go through the Windows Start menu. The final item I'm going to show how to add is just a link to an external web page, in this case the Dynamics community site. Add and done. And that is added shortcut which will automatically open up into Internet Explorer. The final step, which is available to administrators only, is the user classes folder. Any shortcut created in these folders will automatically be made available to all users of that class next time they log into Dynamics GP. In the next video, we'll take a look at using user preferences to change the behavior of Dynamics GP for individual users. In the last video, we looked at creating shortcuts in the navigation pane of Dynamics GP. In this section, we're going to take a look at user preferences and some of the changes that users can make to their system. To access user preferences, use the Microsoft Dynamics GP menu and click User Preferences. The most commonly used options in here are the entry key, where you can change it between tab and return. The return key is often used as an entry key by people who are more used to green screen text-based systems, and allows you to hit the enter key to move through fields instead of hitting tab as you generally would in Windows. Also, you've got the default sales document type, so if you're working in the sales order processing module, you can choose which type of document you do the most often. In this case, I usually deal with invoices, so I can change the value to invoice. When I load the screen in, it will default the transaction type to invoice. One of the other things you will want to have a look at is the display options. In here you can change how link fields and required fields show. By default in Dynamics GP, required fields shows black bold text, which doesn't make them stand out very well. What we can actually do though is change the font colour to red. If we click apply there, if I load in transactions, purchase and transaction entry, you'll see that the fields for creditor ID, voucher number, document date and document number are in bold red text and stand out from other fields on the window. And you can also choose to underline prompts or not on this screen. If we say OK and return back to the main user preferences window, we can also change our password from within user preferences. So type in the old password, hit tab, type the new password, hit tab and confirm it, say OK, and the password will be changed. Autocomplete allows you to change whether or not autocomplete suggestions should be shown and how often to remove unused entries. So we could say remove unused entries after 30 days, and the maximum number of entries to store per field is 100. And we can also choose to remove all current entries on the system. Say OK, and we'll be warned there the changes to autocomplete will only take effect next time we log into the company. So if I say OK, and OK, password change will only take effect next time I log in as well. So that's a quick overview of some of the most popular features of user preferences. That's the end of the logging and user customization section of this video series. Next up, we'll be taking a look at inquiring in smart lists. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course. Section 2, Inquiries and Smart Lists. In this section, we're going to take a look at the account rollup inquiry, smart list, undocumented smart list search, letter writing assistant, and navigation lists. In the last section, we took a look at logging into Dynamics GP, as well as some of the user customizations. In this section, we're going to have a look at inquiries and smart lists, starting off with the financial series account rollup inquiry. This is quite a simple, easy way of getting actual figures, budget figures, previous year figures off without the need for management reporter. So in this case, in the account rollup inquiry, to create a new inquiry, hit the modify button and type in the option ID. We'll sort it by account and we'll have two columns to start with. One with the actuals and one with the previous years. So the type on the first line we'll leave at actuals, on the second line we'll change to previous year. And I want a restriction in of segments to restrict this down to the sales codes. If I insert, you'll see the restrictions, and I can save that, hit redisplay, and it quickly pulls back the information for those two sections. I can choose to have the net change or the period balance. I can choose the year that I want to inquire on, and if I select a row, I can click actuals and drill in and see the information that makes up that figure. Again, I can see summary detail, I can have the net change. I can also work out the difference between the two columns by increasing the number of columns to 3 and doing a calculated field. And you can get quite exotic with the calculations in here if you want to, but for this example I'll just quite simply do an actuals minus the previous. Say OK, save that. When we redisplay the report, we'll get 3 columns on there. As I mentioned at the start, we can also get budget figures as well. So if we increase the number of columns to 4, which is the maximum we can have, we can have budget, take the budget, and we can do a lookup to get that, and then we'll use the master 2017 budget, which is the same year that Fabricam is operating in. If we select that, we can then save that away, hit redisplay, and we get the 4 figures coming through. We've got the actual figures for 2017, previous figures for 2016, the difference between the two, as well as the budget for 2017. And you can have as many account rollup inquiries saved on the system as you want. So you could give each department an account rollup inquiry with their actuals, previous year figures, budget figures on there as well. So, quick overview of the account rollup inquiry. Next, we're going to take a look at the basic smart list functionality. In the last video, we took a look at the account rollup inquiry. In this one, we're going to have a look at smart list. Available on the Microsoft Dynamics GP menu, Smart List is one of the reporting tools available. The left-hand navigation pane is broken down by series, and within each series is broken down by record type. If we expand vendors and take the asterisk entry, this shows us the main Smart List, which is returning information for every vendor on the system. If we select vendor balance, it shows us a more restricted Smart List, still of every vendor, but limited information, and including the current balance. We can restrict this list down by using the search button. And in here we can have up to 4 search definitions. So if I do a lookup, by default it shows the selected columns on the smart list, but if I click selected columns I can change to all columns, and there's much more data than I can report on. In this case I'm going to select the state column, say OK, and there's different filters I can use, but again I'll use is equal to state of Illinois. When I'm working on the report, I would tend to keep the maximum records low, but when I'm happy with the report being produced off, increase that number off to get the maximum amount of data. If we had more than one search definition, we can control the search type. The default is match all, but can be changed to match one or more. I'll leave this at matched all and say OK. And the smart list refreshes and shows us only those vendors within the state of Illinois. If we're working elsewhere in GP, updating vendor information, we can come back to the smart list if it's still open and hit the refresh button, and that'll refresh the data and show the information as it currently is in the system. We can also, by using the columns button, change the column display. And in here we can remove columns or we can add columns. So if we drill in, and again do a lookup for state, I can add the state column into the report, and by selecting it, I can move up. If I want to rename a column, it's as simple as clicking on the display name and typing the new name, and then say OK, and the smart list will refresh with the additional column and the renamed balance column. We can save smart lists for the future and add them to the list in the navigation pane by clicking the Favorites button. I'll call this vendor balance in Illinois, and I can choose who it's visible to. System makes it available to everyone, company to everyone in this company, to people of the same user class, or only to my individual user. In this case, I'm going to leave it at system. When we click add, we can choose to add a favorite or add a favorite and a reminder. If we select this option, you'll see that it's added the favorite to the smart list already, and then I can choose how I want the reminder to display on the home page. In this case, I'll say where the number of records is greater than 0 and will display as a visual cue. Say OK and refresh the home page. The visual cue is displayed. We can also hit the print button to print this off, or we can hit the Excel button to pass the smart list out to Excel, which will happen very quickly. Now we have the smart list out of the system. The Word button allows us to pass a Word table out, or we can use the letter writing assistant, which we'll show in a later section. The final thing to show you is if you select a record, there's a Go To button in the top corner, which allows you to select the window to open. So in this case, I could go to the vendor inquiry, and that'll open the window, or I could take a look at the vendor credit summary inquiry. Each smart list on the system has its own drill downs available. So in this case, I could drill down to the vendor transaction inquiry. So that's an overview of smart lists. In the next video, we're going to have a look at some of the undocumented search features in smart list. In the last video, we took a look at smart lists, and we showed how to restrict the report down by using the search functionality, change the columns available in the report, save a favourite for future use, how to print the report, or how to export it to Excel or Word. As we saw, the search is somewhat restricted in that you can have 4 search definitions, but the search type is either match all or match one or more. This means you're a little bit restricted in what you're doing, in that with a standard search you couldn't have all vendors between A and C and P, because you can't do split ranges within SmartList, according to the documented search features. There is a way, however, of doing that in a way which isn't documented, but does fully work. What we'll do to show this is use the standard vendor SmartList, and to start with I'm going to give it a column restriction of country being equal to the USA. So we'll see only vendors based within the US. And what we could do is add a second search in for vendor ID is between A and M. Say OK there, we'll see all those vendors in that list. And as I say, if we wanted to restrict that down, we've got a problem in that we can't exclude certain ranges. What we can do, however, is change this to a begins with, and then use square brackets to give it a list of characters that it should use for matching on the output. So if I accept that and say OK, I'll get all vendors back who begin with the 6 letters I input there, A, B, C, I, K, and L. What I can also do is switch this around, so I can see all vendors except those within that list. And I'll do that by adding, after the first square bracket, a circumflex character. And this basically says where the vendor ID does not begin with A, B, C, I, L, or K. If I OK that, that will show all other vendors who were not in the original list. As I said, that is one of the undocumented features of SmartList that you will not find within the help. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the letter writing assistant. In the last video, we took a look at one of the undocumented search features available within SmartList. In this video, we're going to have a look at the letter writing assistant, which is available on the Reports menu and can be used to generate mail merge letters out of GP. So if we say next, we have a choice to prepare using an existing letter or customize letters by adding new ones or changing existing ones. In this case, we'll prepare using an existing letter and say next. We'll have a creditor letter, and we have a choice on who to send this to. We can use all creditors, or a range of creditor names or IDs, or we can actually use a smart list. So in this case, I'll use the Illinois vendor balance that we created in the smart list video. If we create a credit request letter, what we can see here is all of the creditors being returned by the smart list. And in this case, I only want to actually produce a letter for the first 4. And then say next. And then we can confirm the information to be used on the signature of the letter. In this case, name, title, phone number, and email address. And say finish. And GP will make a call out to Word, open the application up, and then mail merge the information out, resulting in several letters being output from the system with information passed out from GP. As we saw as we went into the letter writing assistant, we can also customize letters by creating new ones, editing them, deleting them, or renaming existing ones. In this case, if I was to have a look at editing an existing letter, what I could do is change the credit request, and that'll open up in Word. I could then make some changes to this Word document, save it away, and the change will be saved away for the next time the letter was produced. The letter writing assistant is also tied into the smart list. If we just quickly show that on the purchaser node, vendors, Illinois vendor balance, on the Word integration, we can prepare a creditor letter, which makes a call out to the letter writing assistant, where you can quickly step through the process of creating the letters. So that's a quick overview of how to use the letter writing assistant. In the next video, we're going to have a look at using the navigation lists. In the last video, we took a look at the letter writing assistant. In this one, we're going to have a look at navigation lists and how they can be used to view and manipulate information. Every module has navigation lists available, and we're going to start off by having a look at the Payables Transactions navigation list within Purchasing Series. As you can see, the pane is split into 3 sections. At the top, there's the ribbon bar, with buttons on for the different actions we can do. The middle section shows the information available within the list, and if we highlight a particular transaction, we see a summary at the bottom of the screen. The first part we'll look at are the restrictions, which on this report as a default includes the last 90 days, as well as including historic transactions, but I could change this quite simply to exclude historic and only see work and open items. If we select the first invoice in the list, you'll see that certain buttons on the ribbon bar become enabled. So I can post this invoice, I can print the document, I can edit and delete it, because this is a work transaction. If it was an open transaction, I can edit it, or I can apply a hold to it. So when we do that, we'll get a confirmation message. If we hit the refresh button, you'll see there's a red stop icon shows next to it to show that the transaction is on hold. To remove the hold, simply enable the checkbox and remove the hold. And again, refresh and the hold is gone. We can always create new documents, so create a new invoice, new finance charge, or a payment, and it launches the appropriate screen. Change the restrictions. If I select a single creditor, on the go to, I can view, edit the creditor, view the creditor, or send out to Excel. And if I select all the transactions there, I can pass that entire list out to Excel. We we also have some reports available where we can print the list off. We can also, if I switch back to include historic, add filters to this list to restrict down the information that's being shown. So if I was to add a filter where the document type is an invoice, a return or a credit memo, and then run that report, you'll see that everything disappears that doesn't match that list. And I can also add a second filter where I could say where the creditor name begins with an A, and that removes all the other creditors from the list. And as I said at the beginning, all the modules have lists available to show different information with exactly the same sort of options available. So if we select outstanding work items, we can post them, delete them, or we can create new entries. So that's a quick overview of the navigation lists that were introduced in Dynamics GP 10. And in the next section, we're going to have a look at some of the reporting available within Dynamics GP. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course, Section 3, Reporting. In this section, we're going to take a look at standard reports and reporting groups, managing reports with My Reports, deploying and using SQL Server reporting services and Excel reports, reconcile to GL. In the last section, we took a look at inquiring and smart lists within the system. In this one, we're going to have a look at reporting. In particular, we're going to start off with looking at the standard report and what can be done with reporting groups. I'm just very quickly going to create a trial balance report, and I'm going to create a summary report called Period End, which is going to include posting accounts with no subtotals for the open year, and we're going to take a date range of the beginning of previous period to the end of the previous period. And we're going to set the destination to screen. I'm going to save this report away. What we're then going to do is have a look at building up a reporting group. So on the reports menu, we've got the option for groups. And in here what we can do is choose the type of report we want to show. So in this case, trial balance. We're going to pick summary, and we'll see here the summary period end report that we created. If we click insert, that makes it a member of the group. And when we click save, we'll be prompted to give the group a name. So in this case, I'll call it thin period end and click save. Save that again. So what we've got there is a group, which if we go in, we can print the report in one go by clicking print. Just to show a little more detail, if we go across to the inventory series and have a look at the reporting groups that's been created in here, we have a reporting group called inv period end, which includes 3 reports. We could quite easily add another report to the group by selecting it, clicking insert, and then clicking save and confirming the name. And when we print this group, we'll get 4 reports off, one after the other. All of them are being sent to screen just as a demonstration, but equally they could be sent out directly to the printer. And you can create a reporting group within each module. What we can also do though, under reports, is we have an option for combined group. And what this allows us to do is build up a group of groups. So what we could do is add financial series, financial period end, and add the sales period end, purchasing period end, and the inventory period end. If we click save there, we could call the whole thing period end, click save, and when we print this, all of the reports within all of those groups will print one after the other. There's no limit to the amount of groups you can have, and there's no limit to the combined groups that you can have. So you can pre-store reports for period ends, year ends, quarter ends, weekly reports, anything you need there. So that's just a quick overview of standard reports and reporting groups. In the next section, we're going to have a look at managing reports with the My Reports options. In the last video, we took a look at reporting groups. In this one, we're going to have a look at My Reports. My Reports is a section on the home screen which allows you to group together any standard GP report or smart list for easy access. By default, any smart list favourites that you save away will automatically be shown on the My Reports section. As you can see, we have the Illinois vendor balance that we created in the last section of the video. We also have an option to add reports, which allows us to automatically add reports that are specific to the user role that was selected, or we can manually add reports. We'll take this option as a demonstration, and as you'll see, GP will load in a list of all the reports that are available on the system and allow us to pick which ones we want to use on the home screen. You can either scroll up and down the list to find the reports you want, or you can use the navigation list filters to select specific reports. In this case, if we take an option which contains period, we'll see the reports that we were using in the last video. For example, we could pick the sales age trial balance and add to My Reports, and we can customize the name for how it's going to display. Or we could pick the stock status report and add to My Reports without changing the name. If we refresh the home screen, those reports will then appear in the list. We can customize this further by using the Report Shortcuts section of the navigation pane. Picking My Reports shows us a listing of all the reports that we have in that section, and we can remove them from there or we can rename them. Alternatively, we could go into the Microsoft Dynamics GP Report section, find a report that we want to use, and we can add it to the list. So for example, we could add in the account category report to the My Report section on the home page. So that's just a quick overview of the My Reports functionality that's available in Dynamics GP. In the next section, we'll take a quick look at the Excel reports and the SSRS reports that are available. In the last video, we took a look at managing reports using the My Reports functionality. In this one, we're going to take a look at the Reporting Services reports and Excel reports which were introduced in Dynamics GP 10. Before the reports can be deployed within Dynamics GP, SQL Server Reporting Services needs to be installed and configured. Once this has been done, the reports can be deployed through the Administration menu under Setup, System, and Reporting Tools Setup. In this window, you would select the report server mode of native or SharePoint integrated. In this example, we're using native mode, and then enter the report server URL and report manager URL, which were defined when SQL Reporting Services was being configured. In this case, we've already deployed the reports to Fabricam, but if there hadn't been, it would be a case of selecting the SSRS reports option and hitting Deploy Reports, and that would deploy the SQL reports for the Fabricam company. In this window on the Excel Reports tab, we can also define how the Excel reports should be deployed. Again, Network Share or SharePoint can be selected. In the case of a network share, you then need to define the reports directory, and in this case we've used a UNC path to the folder that should be installed in. And I would always recommend using a UNC path for these things in case not all users have the same map drives. We've also defined a user level report which looks at the local C drive for any custom reports that I'm going to create and access through GP. And to deploy the reports into the reports directory, in the case of checking the box and hitting Deploy Reports. When SSRS reports are deployed, there's two additional stages, as well as GP security, that needs to be gone through. And that's in Report Manager, the folder settings need to be modified to give access to the relevant groups of domain users or individual domain users, and this can be done at different levels. So different groups of users could see purchasing reports to sales reports, for example. And the final step is that the SQL logins need to be modified so that the user mapping includes the relevant reporting roles, such as RUPDOL user. Once that's been done, back in Dynamics GP, the user will have two new options on the navigation pane: Excel reports and Reporting Services reports. Each module has these menu options available. When you go into the module ones, you'll see the reports which are specific to these modules. So in this case, I could run the age trial balance by checking the box and hitting the View button. And this will open the report up in Internet Explorer and allow the options to be defined at the top. So I could say Sort by Vendor ID hit View Report, and that will generate the report. If you wanted to edit the report, this can be done on the Modify part of the ribbon by clicking the Edit Report button, which will launch the SQL Report Builder. This is a part of SQL Server and is distinct from the standard GP report writer, which allows modified reports to be changed. In Report Builder, the reports can be changed to change the selection criteria or to change the look and feel of the reports. As you can see, that's the Report Builder window. Running Excel reports in GP is just the same. If we move to Excel reports, we see the list. We could run the two payables transactions one by double clicking it, and it'll open Excel. For security reasons, we'll need to enable the data connection. That'll then connect to GP and pull the data back into Excel. And this is a real-time update from GP. We could refresh the data if we've been working in GP, adding some additional transactions in. In the next video, we'll take a look at the Reconcile to GL. In the last video, we took a look at Excel reports and SSRS reports that are available within Dynamics GP. In this last video of this section, we're going to have a look at the Reconcile to GL report. In my experience, this is a very underused report, despite having been introduced a couple of versions ago in GP 10. Available within the Financial series, on the Routines menu, Reconcile to GL allows either payables management or receivables management to be reconciled against the general ledger. If, as an example, we take payables management and select a date range of 2 months, and I typically advise not doing more than 2 to 3 months in any one go, just because of the amount of transactions that will be selected and returned in the report. We then select the range of accounts that we want to look at. In this case, I've only selected the accounts payables code, and when we hit process, it will select all the transactions and generate a spreadsheet much like this one. The spreadsheet is broken down into 2 columns. The left-hand side is all the transactions on the payables management ledger, and the ones on the right on the general ledger. The first section of the report is the unmatched transactions. So in this case, it's identified a series of transactions which exist only within payables management. These are likely transactions that have been registered on the system and posted, but have posted to, but not through the GL. So they'll be outstanding on the GL, waiting for the batch on there to be posted. The second section of the report is potentially matched transactions. These are ones where the system thinks it can match them up, but it isn't sure if it can, because there's some difference in the dates or other values. It may be that the batches are being posted through with the batch date instead of transaction date, so they arrive on the GL on a different date. And the third and hopefully larger section of the report is the matched transactions. Those transactions where there's 100% certainty that what's on one side is on the other ledger as well. As I say, there is a similar report that can be run for receivables management, where you can select the account codes you want to do along with the date range. When you generate that, the system goes away, selects all the transactions on receivables management and on general ledger, and goes through working out what exists on one system, what exists on the other system. As you can see in the background there, the report that's being generated through has a single transaction on the receivables management ledger, one on the general ledger that don't match, but everything else on the report is a matched transaction where there's 100% certainty on the system for how the transactions are posted through, and that it's certain that they do match through. These reports can be run on an ad hoc basis, and do remember the account codes that were used the last time the report was generated. So next time you go into the Reconcile to GL, the same transactions will be available. If we just scroll down there, you can see all the transactions that match through on the 2 systems. So that's a quick overview of Reconcile to GL. In the next section of these videos, we're going to have a look at a few different ways that data within the system can be kept tidy. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course. Section 4, Keeping Data Tidy. In this section, we're going to take a look at reactivating account segment warnings, utilising account aliases and allow account entry, setting budget passwords and how to reset a forgotten password, correcting posting errors on the GL, and making sure purchase orders are closed. In the last section, we took a look at reporting in Dynamics GP, and in this one, we're going to have a look at a few of the ways in which data can be kept tidy. The first one we're going to have a look at is the use of proper account names. One of the problems with account names is that when new segments are created, they don't always get descriptions. On a new Dynamics GP implementation, you'll get this warning when creating a new section, telling you that a new segment will be created and prompting you to enter a description for the segment. It's always advisable to do this so that when the full account code is entered, a default description is created. However, you can actually choose not to display this message again, which at many sites I've dealt with has led to problems with descriptions not defaulting through. So for example, if I show segment 777 being created, there's no prompt to go away and create the description for it. Through the front end of GP, there is no way to re-enable that warning box. However, it can be done through SQL Server Management Studio with a fairly simple script. This script deletes the entry from SY01401 where the code default type is equal to 13, and in this case where the user ID is DynSA. We could enable it for all users by excluding the AND part of the where clause and executing the script. And that goes through and it enables the segment warnings for all users on the system. So if I create 777 again, I get the warning. And I can enter the description, save it away. And as I go through the code, the other parts are defaulted through, and as you can see, we have some legacy data without descriptions in. If you do get something like this, it's always best to go through and correct the description so that you have a full descriptive name for the account, which will make it much easier for users to use. So that's a quick overview of how to re-enable the account segment warning and to set normal descriptions against your accounts. In the next one, we're going to have a look at allowing account entry and using account aliases. In the last video, we took a look at reactivating the account segment warnings. In this one, we're going to take a look at account aliases and allow account entry. Both of these options are available in the Financial series under Cards, Account. If I load in the accounts receivable account, you'll see there's a field called Alias. This allows us to define a short name to easily and quickly select the account without having to remember the number. As you'll know, as a chart of accounts grows larger, it can be difficult to remember all of the accounts that have been defined, so aliases can provide a quick way to access these accounts. If I click Save there, and go to the Transaction Entry window, and start creating a correcting journal, in the account field, I can either hit the blue expansion arrow to launch account entry, or I can press Ctrl-Q, which brings up the same window. If I type in the account alias of AR and hit Tab, that brings the account back and allows me to enter the value. So I no longer need to remember the account number once an alias has been defined. So you can define aliases against any of the regular account codes that get selected in the system. For example, on accounts payable, I could define an alias of AP. The second feature I want to show is allow account entry. So if I load back in the accounts receivable, you'll see the checkbox for allow account entry is checked. While this is checked, as you saw in the journal, I was able to select the account for use. If I disable this option, save account maintenance, and create a new journal, when I try to enter the accounts receivable in here, I'll receive an error message telling me that the account does not allow account entry. So once allow account entry has been disabled, I can no longer manually select those codes for use. But if I was entering a sales transaction, the system itself can still define and default in the accounts receivable code. In the next video, we'll take a look at budget passwords. In the last video, we took a look at account aliases and allowing account entry. In this one, we're going to take a look at setting passwords on budgets and what to do if the password needs to be reset. For large parts of the system, the standard security of whether or not a user has access to a window is sufficient. But for some other things like budgets, you might want to allow people to change some budgets and not others. One way you can control this is by setting up passwords. So for example, if we go into Cards Financial Budgets and select the budget for this current year in the Fabricam company, which is 2017. What we can do is open using Microsoft Dynamics GP, and we can then set a password by clicking on the padlock icon next to the budget ID, and it'll ask us to set a new password. Confirm the password and say OK. When we save that budget, the next time you try to open it, we'll be prompted for the password. And if we can't supply the password, we won't be granted access. Now, when a password has been set, users can still interrogate the data. So for example, I can run the account rollup inquiry option ID sales and get budget figures off, but I can't actually change the budget figures themselves, I can only view them. If I want to change the password, I can return to the budgets window, open using GP, enter the password in, and if I click on the padlock icon, by confirming the old password, I can set a new password and confirm it, and the password will be updated. So that's great if I know the budget password. However, if the budget password has been forgotten, I can't get into the budget at all. And there is nothing through the front end of Dynamics GP I can do to correct this. However, there's a fairly simple script that can be run in SQL Management Studio. One key thing to remember is to include your where clause. And this will erase the password from this particular budget. So if I go into GP again now, into the budgets window, and open that up, there is no password there, and I can go in as if it was a new budget and create a brand new budget password, which needs to be entered the next time it's going to be changed. So that's a quick overview of how to set a password up on a budget, and what to do if you want to change it, or if you've forgotten and need to reset the password. In the next section, we'll take a look at correcting posting entries on the GL. In the last video, we took a look at setting budget passwords and resetting the password if it had been forgotten. In this one, we're going to take a look at correcting entries on the general ledger. The traditional way of correcting a misposting on the GL is to raise a new journal for the opposite values. However, if you're dealing with a large journal, this can be quite a chore to go through and enter that again. There is, however, in Dynamics GP, an alternate approach. In the transaction entry window, on the button bar, there is a correct button, which when selected opens the correct journal entry window. And in here you have a choice of two actions. The first, back out a journal entry, creates a mirror image of the original journal and reverses it off. The second option, back out a journal entry and create a correcting entry, reverses the original posting, but then creates a new journal which can be updated and posted through. So as an example, we're going to pick the back out a journal entry and create a correcting entry option. Accept the original journal entry year of 2017, which is the year Fabricam's operating in. And then on the original journal entry, we're going to do a lookup and find the transaction we want to reverse off. In this case, journal 668. If we select that and say OK, that information is brought back to the transaction entry window and automatically populated in. And you'll notice that we can't change the account codes, the debit values, or the credit values. We could change the date and the reference if we want to, or just to simply reverse off the journal as it was, we can hit the post button. And the system posts that through and then automatically create a correct journal entry. And in here we can actually update the account codes, the debit or credit values if we want to. So in this case, we'll change the account code to the cash operating account. When we post this, it'll post a new journal through, putting the values to where they are actually wanted. There are a couple of restrictions to bear in mind with the correction functionality. The first is that you can't correct a correcting journal, so if you accidentally reverse something, you can't use this to put it right. The second one is that by default, transactions from subsidiary ledgers cannot be selected. So this example here, journal 1202, has come through from sales order processing, we can't correct it, with default settings. If we're sure we want to be able to correct this sort of journal, in the general ledger settings, what we can do is go through and on the allow section is change avoiding correcting of subsidiary transactions. We can also allow the back out of intercompany transactions as well. But for now, if we accept avoiding correcting of subsidiary transactions, say OK. If we go back to the correct journal entry window, we can now accept and reverse out a subsidiary transaction. You'll be warned that transaction was entered in sales and there'll be no updates there, so we can choose to continue, and this will allow us to back out the journal. But it's very important that you're careful about how you do this, because there will be no postings done to sales order processing in this instance. So any changes that are needed there should really be done through that module. But if it's simply a case of moving a value from one code to another code for a misposting, it could be corrected through this window. So that's a quick overview of correcting journal postings. In the next video, we're going to take a look at making sure that all purchase orders are correctly closed. In the last video, we took a look at correcting posting errors on the general ledger using correcting journals. In this one, we're going to take a look at making sure the purchase orders are closed correctly. As an example, I'm going to show you a purchase order entered onto the system in the Inquiry Purchase Order Documents window that was raised for Inner City Electric. If we show that, there's a purchase order there on the system for a quantity of 100 24-speed IDE CD-ROMs. And there's a goods received note on the system for that purchase order showing that 80 items were received. One thing I've often seen with clients is that they go into purchase order entry, load in the purchase order when the wrong number of items has been delivered, and change the quantity ordered down to match the goods received note. If you do that, you can't report on purchase orders to see if vendors have been supplying the exact quantity that was ordered or not. So instead of going into that window, they should be using the Edit Purchase Orders window, loading the PO in here, and entering a quantity cancelled. So in this case, 20 items were cancelled, which sets a purchase order to a status of closed. And if we do that and click Process, close that window down. If we go back to the Purchase Order Documents Inquiry and do a lookup, you'll see that if we look back at this purchase order, the status is now closed. We have a quantity cancelled of 20. So we could use this in reports to analyse which vendors have actually been supplying the correct number of items ordered and which ones have been failing to deliver. In the next section, we're going to take a look at speeding up data entry and reducing data entry errors. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course. Section 5, Speeding Data Entry and Reducing Data Entry Errors. In this section, we're going to take a look at using window and record notes, using named and unnamed comments, quick and recurring journals, combining budgets, and updating the chart of accounts using Mass Modify. In the last section, we took a look at some of the ways data could be kept tidy within Dynamics GP. In this one, we're going to take a look at speeding up data entry and reducing data entry errors. To start with, we're going to have a look at window and record notes. Each window in Dynamics GP has a notes icon in the bottom right corner next to the help icon, which allows you to add a window note. A window note is one which is recorded against this window and is visible to all users of the system. So it can be used for things like storing information that the user needs to enter in a particular window. For example, if we take a look at vendor maintenance, the icon in this window is showing a different one for the window notes because there's a note being recorded against this window. If we open that up, you can see that the note that's been added is the information required for new vendors when they're being created. So this is being used as a prompt for users for the information they need to get from the vendor when they're being entered into the system. The one drawback of using window notes for this sort of thing is that if a user has access to the window to see the note, they can also change or delete the note. So a little bit of user training would be needed to make sure that users know not to change or delete notes that are being used for prompts on information required to be entered. The other sort of note that's available in the system is a record note, and this is tied to the particular item that it's linked to. So in this case, you can see next to the vendor ID field, there's a new page icon which allows a note to be added to a particular vendor. If I do a lookup and select Allenson Properties, and then click on the record note icon, it takes me to a notes window where I can either add a text note into here. Or I can click the paperclip icon and attach an OLE object. If we do that by going Edit and Insert New Option, I have one or two choices. I can either create a new note by selecting one of the object types available, or I can create one from File, and I can browse to the location where the file is. In this case, in my Documents library, under Letters, I've got an entry for Allenson. And within there, we've got the Terms and Conditions document we were sent by the vendor. So if I click Open on there, I can then choose whether or not to load the document into GP, or merely set a hyperlink up to the location of the file. I can also choose to display as icon, and it will show me the relevant icon for the document type. In this case, it's a Word document. If I say OK, it'll pull back the OLE object and make the link to the file. If I say File, Save, and then exit the setup there, that OLE object will be attached to the note against the record. If I click Attach, the note icon changes to a page icon, showing that there's something there. If I save the vendor away and load them back up, you see the note is available, and I can click the button and go in and see the OLE object is being recorded. I could have wanted to enter a particular date against this, because notes only have one date and time for the last time they were changed. Or I can click the paperclip icon, which now shows it holding a bit of paper, and I can go in and I can see the object, and I could delete it, or I could open the document and make changes to it from within GP. Just to prove the point, if I load in a different vendor, there's no note showing against it. So record notes are tied to the individual item they're recorded against. Window notes are recorded against the screen itself. So that's a quick overview of window and record notes within Dynamics GP. In the next video, we're going to take a look at using named and unnamed comments. In the last video, we took a look at using window and record notes. In this one, we're going to have a look at using comments against purchase orders and sales transactions. Comments can be entered in one of two styles. They can be either named transactions, which have been predefined on the system, or they can be unnamed transactions, which are entered on an ad hoc basis. If we want to create a named comment, this is done on the Administration series, under Setup, Company, and Comments. This opens the comment setup window. If we do a look up on the comment ID, you can see we've predefined two comments on the system already. First for purchasing, which we'll use to apply to purchase orders to instruct the supplier to call 30 minutes prior to delivery. And the comment we have predefined for sales is informing the customer that our driver will call 60 minutes before arriving on site to make the delivery. To use the comment on a purchase order, what we do in purchase order entry is start raising the PO. And at the bottom of the screen, we have the comment ID. And in here, we can either do a lookup for the existing comment that we've created on the system, and then we can use the expansion arrow to customize the comment. Or alternatively, what we could do is create a custom comment just by hitting the expansion button and keying it in. We can also, against each line on the purchase order, enter a comment, so each line can have its own comment related to that item. And when the purchase order is printed off, it'll print off next to the line. The same principle applies within the sales series, where on sales transaction entry we can enter comments against the order itself or against individual lines. In sales, however, we can go one stage further. Under Tools, Setup, Sales, we've got the Sales Order Processing option, and against each of the document types we can define a comment ID that should be used as a default. So if I pull in our call 60 minute prior named comment and save the change away, next time I raise a sales transaction, that comment is going to default in. If we raise this sales order, you can see when we print this order off, and I'll just send it to screen for ease of visibility, you can see that against the order, the comments have been printed at the bottom. If we'd used a line comment, that had been printed alongside each line. So that's a quick overview of using named and unnamed comments. In the next video, we'll take a look at using quick and recurring journals. In the last video, we looked at using named and unnamed comments. In this one, we're going to take a look at quick journals and recurring journals. Before Quick Journal can be created, a template needs to be defined on the Setup Financial menu in the Quick Journal window. I'm going to show a template I've previously created called Bank Transfer, where I've selected a source document of GJ, given it a reference which will be used on the individual transactions when they're created of Bank Transfer. I've selected an offset account and a range of other accounts for which values are to be posted. I can also choose whether or not to allow the offset account to be overridden when the transaction is created. You can add as many accounts to the Quick Journal template as you want to use. It's just a case of inputting values when the Quick Journal itself is created. And that's done on the Transactions Financial menu under Quick Journal. And in here, you look up the template you've previously created, and all the information is defaulted through, with the header information can be updated if required. And then it's a case of going through and entering the values which are to be posted to the accounts. If there's a line which will be left off the journal this time, just simply skip over and leave the value at 0. The remaining balance at the end will be automatically posted by GP to the offset account. So if I post this journal, print the report to screen, we'll see that the journal that's being created has the remaining £5,000 automatically posted to the savings account. So quick journals are a good way of quickly getting information into the system without having to manually select the accounts each time. Recurring journals can also be used to speed up the entry of transactions on the system. These are entered through the Standard Batches window under Transactions Financial. If we create a batch called Bank Transfer, of type General Entry, we can choose the frequency of posting. We have multiple options. Commonly used ones, single use for a single posting, or for recurring journals, weekly, monthly or quarterly are the ones I've typically seen used. If we select monthly, we can then choose the number of recurring postings. If we leave this at 0, it will continue to recur until we delete the batch in future, or we can give it a set number of times to recur. In this case, I'll leave it endlessly recurring. And I can choose whether or not to clear recurring amounts on each posting, which means that each time, if I am clearing recurring amounts, I need to set the values before I post it again. And to add transactions to the batch, click the Transactions button, and then enter the details for the journals that should be created. So in this case, I'll pick the savings account, and post £10,000, and then I'll just select a couple of other cards to offset against it. Save that away. Note the transaction date of the 12th of April. If I load the batch in, post it, it will post one instance of this, but the batch remains behind for subsequent postings. If I drill into the transactions, you'll see that the date is automatically being incremented by the system. And on the batch as well, one thing to note is that it keeps a track of the number of times the batch has been posted and when the last posting was. Additionally, if you want to inquire on the batch using SmartList, what we can do is do a lookup on the journal entry number, and you'll see that all postings of the batch are showing on the system. So the one that we posted in April is showing with the same journal entry number as the one which is waiting to be posted next time. So we can always look and see how much the journal has been posted. So that's a quick overview of quick journals and recurring journals. Next we're going to take a look at combining budgets. In the last video we took a look at using quick and recurring journals. In this one we're going to have a look at combining budgets. Under Cards Financial Budgets, you have the Budget Selection window, where you can maintain or create new budgets. One of the regular requests from clients in the past was to be able to deal with budgets in this sort of way. Have one master budget for the year, but then have separate budgets for each department or budget holder, so they could distribute these out and then wait for them to come back before merging them together. However, prior to Dynamics GP 2010, this wasn't possible. In GP 2010, Microsoft a new feature on the budget, so if we select the 2017 master, do open using Microsoft Dynamics GP, we now have a Combine Budgets button. And just to show how this works, I'm going to quickly load in one of the accounts on the system and show that on the master budget there's no figures there. But if we scroll through to the accounting budget, we have got budget figures in against this code. If I select Combine Budgets, and instead for the master budget ID, so the one we're going to merge into, I select the 2017 master, and combine with budget ID 2017 accounting, I can choose to delete the budget after it's combined, or I can choose to leave it behind so that I can deal with it again. In this case, I'm going to delete the budget, and then click the Process button. GP will come back and confirm that the process has been successful. If I close the Combine Budget windows, and scroll through to the master budget again, you'll see that the figures now say 2000. And if I do a lookup on the budget, the 2017 accounting budget no longer exists. One thing to bear in mind when you're combining budgets is that it's a combine, so it will combine the figures together and merge them together. If we select a new account code and show this, the salaries and wages for the administration department, which is showing 1000. And if we look at the admin budget, it says 1500. If I do a combine now on this, merge it into the master budget, you'll see that the figures now say 2500 on the master budget. This can be useful if you're wanting to do some adjustments through the year from Excel, but it is something to be very careful of. So that's an overview of the combining budgets functionality that was introduced in Dynamics GP 2010. In the next video, we're going to take a look at updating the chart of accounts using Mass Modify. In the last video, we took a look at combining budgets. In this one, we're going to take a look at updating the chart of accounts using Mass Modify. Mass Modify is available on the menu under Cards Financial. And in this window, we can do various actions to update the chart of accounts. We can copy a range of codes from one area of the chart of accounts to another. We can move a section, but we can only move those codes that do not have transactions against them. We can inactivate zero value codes to prevent users from entering transactions into those codes when they shouldn't. We can delete codes which haven't been used, or we can update them by changing the level of posting from series. As an example, I'm going to copy the administration section of the chart of accounts to a new section. So I'm going to pick all codes beginning with 100 to the end of the 100 range, and I'm going to create a new account mask of 800, and this will copy the codes down from the 100 range to the 800 range. I can use the account description from existing accounts, or I can choose to take them from the account segments. If choosing the latter option, we will be warned that any new segments, or segments without descriptions, will result in an account description with a blank space. That segment description. If I say OK and then modify, the system will process through and create the new segment on the chart of accounts based off the 100 range. In this case, the codes that have been created have no descriptions because the segments are unnamed, but I can go through and give each code a description. If I want to prevent data error problems from cropping up by people misposting on the general ledger, I can go through and inactivate either a range of codes or all accounts, and I can choose whether to do zero balance accounts or all accounts. If I leave it at zero balance, when I modify, I'll be asked to confirm, and I can then say inactivate. The system will go through and switch off every code that hasn't been used and doesn't have an outstanding balance against it. Inactivating these codes prevents people from posting values to codes that are no longer in use, so it can be a very easy way of reducing data entry problems. In the next section, we're going to have a look at a few more ways to speed up data entry and reduce entry problems. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course, Section 6. Speeding data entry and reducing data entry errors, Part 2. In this section, we're going to take a look at copying purchase and sales orders, transferring multiple sales orders to invoice, adding sales commitments to purchase orders, and preventing the sale of discontinued items. In the last section, we took a look at speeding up data entry and reducing entry errors. In this section, we're going to continue along the same theme. The first one we're going to have a look at is how to copy purchase orders. So in the purchasing series, if we go to purchase order entry, there is a somewhat hidden option on this window which is quite underused. And this is on the Actions button. We have the option to create and copy a new PR. By picking the source PR, we can identify the transaction that we want to make a copy of. So we might want to use one from Offer Specialists, which we want to duplicate. The vendor ID, document date will be defaulted in along with the currency. We can choose the site option, so whether to use the source PR site, or we could tell it to use a specific site. We can change the dates. There's also a few other fields at the bottom that we can do, such as copying freight amounts, copying miscellaneous amounts. We can also include cancelled quantities. This option is useful if you originally generated a purchase order for 5 items, had received 3, and cancelled 2. Checking this box would raise the new purchase order that we're creating via copy for 5 items and not the 3 that had been shipped on the original. The particular purchase order we're copying here doesn't have any cancelled quantities on. We can preview the line items that are going to be created, and we can actually override them in the preview window, so that instead of having 1 this item, we can have 2. If I say OK, when I hit copy, purchase order is generated and displayed in the window, and we can now handle this as we would any other manually created purchase order. We can add items, we could remove items, and in the case of a big purchase order, we've saved a lot of time in the copy process over manually entering. There is similar functionality available within the sales module on sales transaction entry. The difference here, however, is that before saying Actions copy, we need to create the header information. So we need to have a number, we need to pick the customer, ship to address, currency, and the other mandatory fields here, before we can go Actions copy, at which point we can pick the order we want to copy. And again, we can choose pricing information, we can choose the site that should be used, and various other options. Again, we can preview it, or we can adjust the quantity. Accept that, and then when we say copy, the sales order is created, and again, we can adjust it as we like before printing it and transferring to invoice. So that's how you copy a purchase order or a sales order and potentially save a lot of time in the creation process. In the next video, we'll take a look at transferring multiple sales orders to invoice. In the last video, we took a look at copying purchase and sales orders. In this one, we're going to take a look at how to transfer multiple sales orders to invoice. The standard way of transferring a sales order to invoice is via the sales transaction entry window, loading in the sales order, and then going to Actions, Transfer, and this allows you to transfer orders to invoice. You'd select the option, you can preview to make sure what's going to go across, and then you'd hit the transfer button. However, this means doing it individual order by individual order. There is another way of doing it in Dynamics GP, which takes slightly less effort. What you can do is you can go into Transfer Multiple Orders, and then here you can choose to transfer orders and or back orders, giving it a destination batch ID, which must be a batch that doesn't exist. In this case, I've dated it with my initials, then 1704 for April 2017, which is the month and year that Fabricam's operating in. Create the batch. Decide on what to do for an item quantity shortage or kit quantity shortage, and then there are a variety of ranges that you can define to restrict down which orders should be transferred. In this case, I'm just going to select batch ID, and I'm going to pick batch IG1704, and I'll insert that restriction. As a standard in GP, I could go through and build up multiple restrictions to restrict down what I actually want to transfer in one go, but in this case the batch ID is sufficient. When I'm happy with the entries that I've made in the fields there, I can hit the transfer button and GP will go away and transfer the orders to invoice and generate a report off so I can see the transfer log. We can see the order ST2233 was transferred to invoice 2263. Likewise, 2235 was transferred to 2264, and there were 0 errors. So if we go into sales batches and do a lookup, we'll now have a batch with 2 invoices on, ready for posting. In the next video, we'll take a look at adding sales commitments to purchase orders. In the last video, we took a look at transferring multiple sales orders to invoice. In this one, we're going to take a look at adding sales commitments to POs. The first way you can do this is when raising a sales order. So if we go into sales transaction entry and generate a new order to order some servers for Aaron Fit, we order 2 servers, we'll be prompted to back order balance because we have none in stock. What we can do at this point of the sales order is we can go to Actions and Purchase, and this will allow us to generate a purchase order. As you can see in the left hand side, it shows that there's no vendor assigned, so we can't order the goods there. What we can do though is go to the PO tab and pick the supplier we want to buy from. The red crosses disappear, so we can tick the boxes there to generate the purchase order. But what we can also do is go into the quantity to purchase on the item tab and increase how many of them we're actually going to buy. And this will allow us to attach more sales commitments or put the excess into stock. We click Generate, the system will show the purchase orders generation register and show us that a new PO 2080 has been generated for 12 of the dual core servers. So if we close the sales transaction window and go to the purchasing series and open purchase order entry, we can load in that purchase order and see that we've got 12 items on order. And this little icon shows there is a sales commitment on this purchase order. If we highlight the line, we can click the same icon next to the quantity ordered header and drill into the sales commitments, and we can see which sales documents have been committed against this purchase order. And by clicking on Add Sales Documents, we can add additional commitments. So we could pick the sales order for Breakthrough Marketing, select that and add it on, add another sales document for Alton Manufacturing, and we're committing 6 of the 12 items ordered on this purchase order with a quantity available of 6. So if we had them, we could add more sales commitments on, or if we leave it as available, those 6 items will go into the general stock when they're received. So if I receive the PO, auto-generate some serials, and post that, what we'll see if we go back into the sales series in the sales transaction entry is that the sales order we generated earlier now has 2 items automatically fulfilled. So that's an overview of generating sales commitments onto a purchase order and them automatically being fulfilled when the goods are received. In the next video, we'll take a look at preventing the sale of discontinued items. In the last video, we took a look at adding sales commitments to purchase orders. In this one, we're going to have a look at preventing the sale of discontinued items. Within the Dynamics GP inventory module, on a cards item, the item type can be changed from sales inventory to discontinued. So if a supplier has stopped making a particular item, it can be discontinued so it can no longer be bought. However, within the sales module, it can still be sold. This is usually a perfectly valid thing to do while there is stock being held, but in some cases you wouldn't want to be raising sales orders when an item is discontinued. I've spoken to a number of clients in the past who've tried finding the setting in GP to disallow the sale of discontinued items without success. This has generally been because they've been looking in the inventory setup, where this particular setting is within the sales order processing setup. So the Tools, Setup, Sales Order Processing, via the Options button and the grid view at the bottom, there's an option for Allow Sale of Discontinued Items. If we deselect that box and save the settings away, when we go into Sales Transaction Entry to generate a sales order, When we try to select the discontinued item, we get a message saying this item is discontinued. Please select another item. So as you can see, when that setting is changed, we can't sell discontinued items, and that is a global setting that will affect every item on the system. To allow a little bit more flexibility, what you can do is, while allowing the sale of discontinued items, you can actually set a password so that when a user tries to sell a discontinued item, they're prompted to enter the password and confirm they really do want to sell it. So if I raise another sales order here, when I enter the item number and tab off, we'll get a prompt saying, please enter the password if you want to sell a discontinued item. When the password is entered, the sales order can be raised as normal. So there are two choices there for preventing the sale of discontinued items. One is a blanket disabling of the ability to do so, and the other is to put a password prompt on there to make the users think about whether or not they really do want to sell the discontinued item. In the next section, we're going to take a look at system maintenance. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course, Section 7. In this section, we're going to take a look at resolving problems with checklinks and reconcile, backing up company databases, ODBC and CNAME aliases, resetting lost DynSA and system passwords, copying live company to test using SQL Server Agent, maintaining dictionaries, and deploying service packs with client update. In the last section, we took a look at some of the ways in which data entry could be speeded up and entry errors reduced. In this one, we're going to take a look at system maintenance. The first one I'm going to look at is checklinks. Checklinks is one of the maintenance routines available within GP, available off the Microsoft Dynamics GP menu, Maintenance, Checklinks. This can be run against different modules to correct problems which occur in data. One of the common ones that comes up is where a transaction ends up in both work and open within the purchasing series. The way to put this right is to change a series to purchasing, pick the payables history logical file, and click Insert. Pick the payables transaction logical file and click Insert. When the OK prompt is clicked, checklinks will run. One very important thing to remember is that when the report destination prompt comes up, cancel only cancels the report. It doesn't cancel the checklinks process. Once you've hit OK on the checklinks screen, checklinks will run. If you say OK to the report descender screen, checklinks will run using the PM Keymaster index table and rebuild it based off transaction status. In this case, no errors were found and checklinks is run through and completed without any problems. And checklinks can be run against different modules to correct different data problems. There is also available, in certain modules, a reconcile utility. If you go to the financial series and have a look in Utilities Reconcile, we have a screen where we can correct account totals based on the transactions which have been posted. Reconcile is also something you need to run if you've changed your fiscal periods. If we select Year and open Year and click Reconcile, the system will go through and check all the account balances against the transactions posted within the year 2017. One other reconcile utility which I recommend clients run on a fairly regular basis is the inventory reconcile. What this one does is it goes through and checks the item quantities, the allocated, the on hand, and makes any corrections which are needed. If you know that a particular item is out of sync, that particular item can be selected and reconcile run against that one item. And again, at this point, if you click cancel, you're only cancelling the report. You're not cancelling the reconcile process itself. So in the case of the inventory reconcile, the system will go through and generate a report showing any changes which has been made. That's a quick overview of checklinks and reconcile. In the next video, we'll take a look at how to back up databases within Dynamics GP. In the last video, we took a look at resolving problems using checklinks and reconcile. In this one, we're going to take a look at backing up and restoring the company databases. While it's recommended practice to have maintenance backup of the system being made every evening, it's also sometimes necessary to make an ad hoc backup during the day. For example, if you're doing a period or year end, or running a maintenance routine like checklinks, making a backup before you start is very much recommended. There's one or two restrictions on making backups and restoring databases in the Dynamics GP. The first is that you should be logged in to make a backup as either the SA user, the DynSA user, or another user who's been granted the relevant permissions. In this instance, I'm logged in as the SA user. So to make the backup, we can go to the Microsoft Dynamics GP menu, Maintenance, Backup. And in here we can select the company to backup. In this case, we'll take Fabricam Inc. And then we need to select the backup file. In this case, I'm backing the file up into a folder under SQL Server Backups Ad Hoc. And the file name's been defaulted in with today's date. And if I say save, the path is pulled back. When I click OK, the backup will be made. Depending on the size of your company database, the backup could take a few minutes to run, but SQL does typically back up databases very quickly. And once a backup is completed, you'll get a dialog informing you that it's been successful. As with backing up the database, there are one or two restrictions on restoring it. The first one is you need to be logged in as the SA user, and the second one is that nobody can be logged into the database you're restoring. So in this case, I can't be in Fabricam Inc., so I need to log across to a different company to restore the backup. If I was logged in as a user other than SA, I wouldn't be able to access the restore form. So while you can make backups as SA or DynSA, restores only the SA user. And to restore the database, on the Microsoft Dynamics GP menu, Maintenance, Restore. Again, we select the company, Fabricam Inc., and we need to select the file to restore from. So if I do a lookup, I can select our July 4th backup. Once I've selected that, say OK, and the restore will start. Restoring a database takes a lot longer than backing it up does, but again, for SQL, it should only take a few minutes to run through. While that runs through, move on to the next video, where we're going to cover ODBCs and CNAME aliases. In the last video, we took a look at backing up company databases from within Dynamics GP. In this one, we're going to have a look at ODBC connections in CNAME aliases. When a user logs into Dynamics GP, the first thing they need to do is pick an ODBC connection to log in with. The ODBC connection contains the server name or IP address of the server which contains the SQL databases. When a user is created in Dynamics GP, the username and the password are encrypted along with the server name, which means that they're tied to that server. If a new instance of SQL is installed, or GP is moved to a new server, all of the passwords need to be reset. For a system with a lot of users, this can be a very big job. However, using CNAME alias, there is a way around that. If we close Dynamics GP down, and go to Start, Administrative Tools, DNS, what we can do in the DNS Manager is expand the forward lookup zone and go to the domain that we're logged into. And we can create a CNAME alias called GP Live that in the initial instance will be pointed at server, which is the computer containing the SQL Server and the GP databases. It needs to be the fully qualified domain name of the server. And if at any point the server name is changed or a new instance of SQL is set up, all we need to do is change the server name that the CNAME is pointing at. So if we accept that, we have a new GP Live CNAME set up. What we can do is modify the ODBC connection, which on a 64-bit server is located in the Windows directory /syswow64 /odbc ad32.exe. If you're running a 32-bit operating system, you can still access it through the control panel. In the ODBC Data Source Administrator, we select the System DSN tab and then configure the Dynamics GP system data source. We can change the SQL Server to the new CNAME alias of GP Live and step through the configuration process. Now when we run Dynamics GP up, we'll log in using the CNAME alias. In the first instance, we will need to reset all of the user's passwords, but this is the last time on the system we'll ever need to do that, because any subsequent moves of server can be handled by just changing the CNAME alias. In the next video, we'll take a look at resetting a lost DynSA or system password. In the last video, we took a look at ODBC and CNAME aliases. In this one, we're going to have a look at resetting lost DynSA and system passwords. When Dynamics GP is installed for the first time, a DynSA user is created and a password needs to be supplied. A system password is also asked for, which is used to control access to forms such as the security setup. However, through time, I've dealt with a few clients who've lost both of those passwords and needed to reset them. Despite being a user in Dynamics GP, the DynSA password cannot be reset through the user security form. Instead, the security must be changed through SQL Server Management Studio. To do this, expand the security node and the logins node and locate the DynSA. Right-click and select Properties. To reset the password, it's a simple case of removing the current password and saying OK. You'll be warned that creating a login with a blank password is a security risk. You'll be prompted to confirm that you're sure you want to continue. Say yes to this prompt. If we close GP down and log in again as a DynSA user, we just put the user ID in and say OK, and we'll be told that blank passwords are not allowed, and do you want to change our password now? Say yes, and you can enter a new DynSA password. Confirm the password and say OK. You can then log into the system as DynSA again. The other password which sometimes gets forgotten is the system password. So, as I mentioned at the start, this is the password used to get into forms such as user security or security tasks. If we've forgotten the password, this password can also be reset, but again, not through Dynamics GP. Like the DynSA one, it needs to be reset through SQL Server Management Studio, and in this case using a SQL script, which does an update on the Dynamics database and the SY02400 table sets a password to this string. Execute the script and it will remove the password, so that when you go into Dynamics GP, if you try to go into Secure Tasks form, for example, the form will just load up. If you want to set a new password, you've got the system password option, which will allow you to define a new password and confirm it. And once done, you'll again be prompted to enter a system password when entering some of the security screens. In the next video, we'll take a look at copying live company to test using SQL Server Agent on a scheduled basis. In the last video, we took a look at resetting the DynSA and system passwords in the event that they were lost. In this one, we're going to take a look at copying a live company to test on a scheduled basis using SQL Server Agent. The first two steps that we need to go through are to create some SQL scripts to back up the live database and restore it over test. We'll do this by right-clicking on the live database and selecting Tasks and Backup. We're going to do copy-only backup to make sure we don't interfere with any maintenance backups which are being run. We're going to back up the file to the C drive SQL Server Backups live-to-test.bak file. And in Options, I'm going to set this to overwrite all existing backup sets. To generate the script, I'm going to click the script button at the top and script the action to a new query window. And then, to make sure that when we generate the next script, we have an up-to-date backup set to use, I'm actually going to run the backup now. Now that the backup of the two databases is completed, we're going to right-click on the test database, say Tasks, Restore Database. We're going to restore the test database from the two database, and it's defaulted in the last backup set that was made, which is the one that we've just run. And on the Options tab, I'm going to overwrite the existing database, and I'm going to change the Restore As to make sure that it overwrites the test database and not the live one. And then I'll click the script button to create the SQL script for this. And then because we don't actually need to do the restore yet, I'll say cancel. The next step under SQL Server Agent is to right-click on the Jobs node and say New Job. We'll call it Copy Live to Test. And on the Steps node, we'll add a new step, which is Backup Live. And we'll copy and paste in the first of the scripts that we produced, which we'll run against the master database and say OK, and create a second step, which is Restore Test. We'll copy and paste in the second of the scripts we produced, which again can run against the master database. The next new step that we need is to change the intercompany ID. This is done using a script supplied by Microsoft in a knowledge base article 871973, set up a test company that has a copy of Live Company by using SQL Server. At the top of this there are a few notes that you may need to pay attention to if you use record level notes, human resources, fixed assets, audit trails, or analytical accounting. The company that I'm backing up now doesn't include any of these, so we don't need to worry about these notes. But it is something you may need to address when running this on a live system. The script that we need is on point 6, so we'll copy and paste this into the agent job, run this against the test database, say OK. And the final step is to change the database owner, which again is done using a script supplied by Microsoft, which is in step 7 of the knowledge base article. And again will be run against the test database. The final step is to create the schedule. So if we click the Schedules node and say New, we'll call this again Copy Live to Test. It's a recurring schedule which is enabled to run weekly, once on a Sunday, and we'll set it to run at 2200 hours. And we'll not put an end date on here because we want it to run weekly so that every Monday morning we have a fresh test system which is up to date with Live. With that set, we can say OK. And if we look in Management Studio, we now have a new agent job scheduled to run at 2200 hours every Sunday. We can run this on an ad hoc basis if we wanted to, by right-clicking, then Start, Job at Step, pick Step 1 and click Start. So any time during the week we can choose to refresh test from Live. So I've just taken a look at refreshing the test system on a scheduled basis from the Live system using SQL Server Agent. In the next video, we'll take a look at maintaining these. In the last video, we took a look at copying the Live Company to test on a scheduled basis using SQL Server Agent. In this one, we're going to take a look at maintaining dictionaries. The application logic, modified forms, and modified reports of Dynamics GP live in dictionary files. By default, these are located in the installation folder of Dynamics GP. If they're left in this location, it means that any change to a modified form or modified window needs to be rolled across all client machines. This has been tackled in the past using the Musgravian method, where a logon script does that copy when a client logs into a machine. However, with the growing resilience of networks, this approach may not be the best one anymore. Growing in popularity is the approach of having a centralized network location containing the modified forms and reports. To do this is quite simple and can be done in one of two ways. Either through the administration series window, edit.launch file, which if we log into this, what you need to do is select a product and then change the location of the dictionaries. It's highly inadvisable to change the application dictionary location. If you are going to use this window, only change the forms and reports ones. It's a case of doing a lookup and identifying the location we want to store it in. What we're doing is we're using the UNC path to server /Dynamics Central /dictionaries. And we'll store the reports dictionary in that location. And we can do the same for the forms dict. When we say OK, this client will be pointing at that central location and will pick up any modified forms or reports put in those dictionaries. However, to do this on each client can take quite a long time. What you can do as an alternative to this is to navigate manually to the launch file of Dynamics GP. In this case, in Program Files x86, Microsoft Dynamics GP, and I want to pick the US instance of GP. If I close GP down in the background, what we've got in this file is a dynamics.set. And if we open this using Notepad, because it is just a text file, we see the products that are installed on the client, as well as the paths where the dictionaries are stored. And you'll see that the two that we changed are shown in this file as changed. What we could do is do a find and replace on all of the paths in here for where the dictionaries are stored for forms and reports, and globally replace them. As you can see, all of the past there have been changed. If we save this away, all products are now looking at a central location on this client for all of the forms and reports. What we could do is, if all clients have been installed in an identical fashion with all of the same modules on them, we could copy and paste that dynamic set file between clients and have all clients quite easily and quickly looking at the same central location. In the next video, we'll take a look at deploying service packs using Client Update. In the last video, we took a look at maintaining dictionaries. In this one, we're going to have a look at applying client updates to Dynamics GP. If you're operating in a thin client environment, such as Terminal Server or Citrix, you're unlikely to have a large number of updates to apply to clients, and so will typically handle them manually. However, if you operate in a thick client environment where each user has their own computer or laptop, client updates can be a massive time saver. Available in the Administration series, under Tools, System, Client Updates, we can define a series of updates which will be applied to each client next time they log in. As an example, we'll create a hotfix update called Hotfix 2012. We tab away from the update name field. The Update Client Next Use checkbox is automatically checked. We can either type in or do a lookup for the UNC path to the update file. Updates can be one of three types: a service pack, a hotfix, or a dexterity dictionary. In this case, we're applying a hotfix, so we'll accept the MSP file and click Open. When we save this away, each client, next time it logs on, will be prompted to install the update. If the update isn't deployed, the client won't be able to log into the system. Once all clients have been updated, the hotfixes can either be disabled or deleted through the same screen. If we do a lookup, we've got a Professional Services Tools Library update, which has previously been used for updating clients. If we open this up, we can uncheck the box and save this away, and no clients will be updated next time they log in, or we can hit the delete button and remove the update entirely. In the next section, we're going to take a look at the Professional Services Tools Library. This is the Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques online learning course, Section 8, Professional Services Tools Library. In this section, we're going to take a look at installing the Professional Services Tools Library, Database Disabler, Copy Company, Master Triggers, and the Combiner. In the last section, we took a look at keeping data tidy and reducing data entry errors. In this one, we're going to take a look at the Professional Services Tools Library. The Professional Services Tools Library, or PSTL for short, is the product of the professional services team at Microsoft, and is a collection of about 35 tools built up over time. They used to be available on a paid-for only basis, but at the start of March became free to everyone. Customers need to approach the partner to get a copy, but partners can download it freely from PartnerSource. When it's downloaded, you get a zip file, which when you extract it, gives you several files. The first is a list of fixed problems since the last version. Then there's the Professional Services Tools Library manual in PDF form, the End User License Agreement, a README file which contains the registration key, and the TA-util.cnk file. This is the chunk file which contains the code to be included in the Dynamics GP. To install PSTL, take a copy of the CNK file and put it into the install folder of the instance of GP you want to install it into. Paste that in and then run up Dynamics GP. As GP starts, it will prompt to include new code, and if you say yes, the chunk file will be loaded into a dictionary and used within GP. When you log into the system for the first time after deploying the chunk file, log in as the SA user. Select the company you want to use PSTL in and finish logging in. By default, PSTL does not create a menu item in the system. So to use it, what we'll need to do is create a shortcut in the navigation pane. So if we right click in the navigation pane and say Add and Add Window, we can then scroll down the list of available windows to the Technical Service Tools, expand the node, then expand Project to select PSTL itself. And that becomes available in the navigation pane. If a user other than SA, DynSA, or other users who have the power user role want to be able to use Professional Services Tools Library, you'll need to configure up security access by creating a new task for the activities and operations the PSTL adds. Then make that task available to a role which you can assign to users. To use PSTL, click the navigation pane shortcut, and this will start up a screen which shows the progress of adding new items into the Dynamics GP databases. This can take a couple of minutes to run through because of the different entries it does, and it then runs the grant script at the end to make sure that the required access is being granted. Once the database update part of the install is finished, you'll be presented with a box to enter the utilities registration code. In the free version of PSTL, this code has already been defaulted in for you. So say OK to this code and PSTL will open. As you can see from the blue checks, all of the functions are available for use. In this section of the video course, we're going to take a look at 4 or 5 of the different functions available. Additional details on the remaining functions, and indeed the functions we're going to cover, are available in the Professional Services Tools PDF that comes with the download of PSTL. And in here there are full details of how to install PSTL and how to use the different sections and different functions to update the system. In the next video we're going to take a look at the database disabler. In the last video we took a look at installing the Professional Services Tools library. In this one we're going to take a look at the database disabler system tool. This tool is very useful in keeping users out of the system if you're wanting to run something like check links, reconcile, or make backups of the system with no users in. The example user I'm going to use during this video is ENG. And just to show the access that this user has, we've got Fabricam Inc. and Fabricam EMEA Inc. If we open the Professional Services Tools library and select the Database Disabler System tool, click Next, we'll get the option to disable companies. If I disable Fabricam Inc. and say OK, and then log into GP as ENG, on the company login window, I now only have access to one company. Fabricam Inc., which was disabled, no longer shows as a company I can log into. If we go back to the session where I'm logged in as SA and reopen the Professional Services Tools library and take the database disabler, I can re-enable access to Fabricam Inc. So that as ENG, I can go in, select the company change option, and Fabricam Inc. is available for selection again. In the next video, we're going to take a look at copying data to a new company. In the last video, we took a look at the database disabler. In this one, we're going to take a look at copying data to a new company. In PSTL, if we select the miscellaneous tool, Company Copy, and click Next, we can copy the data from a source company to a destination company. The source company we're going to use is Fabricam Inc., and the destination is a newly created Fabricam EMEA Inc. We can choose to copy data, and there are dependencies on these. If data is selected, then financial must be selected. This is because of dependencies on the account index from the general ledger. Likewise, report options requires company to be selected. If you try to deselect something where there is a dependency, you'll get an error message telling you that a particular item is required, and you can't deselect it. There are other dependencies, such as bill of materials on inventory, extended pricing on receivables and inventory. You can choose which modules to copy across. So we could copy everything across, except for fixed assets, for example, or we could check the box to say copy all modules across. Only those modules which are installed are available for selection. So project accounting, manufacturing, and human resources are not installed in this system, so we can't select them. When you've made all the selections that you want to do, it's a case of hitting Process to start the copy. When you do the copy, you'll be giving this warning that all tables in the destination company for the selected criteria, data and/or report options for the module selected will be deleted prior to being copied from the source company, and you wish to continue. Company copy is only something that should be used for a newly created company and not for updating an existing company, as you will lose data if you use this on an existing company. If you're happy to proceed, click Continue. And as stated, the company copy will delete the data from the existing tables and repopulate it from the source company. You'll be told at the bottom that the company copy process is finished. If we close those two windows down, we'll be able to log across to Fabrikam EMEA. And as an example, if we go into the financial series and look at the accounts navigation list, we'll see that the chart of accounts has been copied over. Likewise, in purchasing, all the vendors will have been copied across to this company as well. So it's a quick overview of how to use the company copy functionality, and always remember not to use it against an existing company, but only for copying settings into a new company. In the next video, we'll take a look at using the master triggers. In the last video, we took a look at the copy company function of the Professional Services Tools library that allows us to copy setup data from one company to another one. In this video, we're going to take a look at master triggers. Master triggers allow us to copy information from one company to another on an ongoing basis. And there are three types of master trigger available: General Ledger, Payables Management, and Receivables Management. As an initial example, we're going to use the GL master triggers. So we select that option under Financial Tools and click Next. The master database has defaulted to 2, which is the Fabrikam database we're logged into. And we have a choice on the Replicate to DB field onto our EMEA, which is our other company. And if we check the box under Accounts and say OK, this will enable the GL master triggers. So if I go into the Financial series, select Account Maintenance, and create a new account code, and save that away, we can then go across to EMEA, look at a navigation list I produced earlier, and if we refresh that, you'll see that a new account code has been added to the top. If we toggle back to Fabrikam and update that account code by changing the description and click Save, you'll see that EMEA, when we do a refresh, the description has also changed. However, if in Fabrikam I delete this account code and then check in EMEA, the account code has remained behind. The important point to remember about master triggers is they will insert new data, update existing data, but do not delete data. So if you're using something like Integration Manager to update the chart of accounts, if there's errors and the integration is rolled back, any company updated via the master triggers will not have the account codes removed, and that will need to be done manually. So if I delete that account code, both the chart of accounts are now back in sync. The same principle works with master triggers for the other series, such as PM and RM. So just as a quick example, we'll enable the PM master triggers for vendors. If we say OK there, we can now create a new vendor and have that change rolled through the system as well. One important point to remember when using PM master triggers is that the internet information is not duplicated, and neither is EFT bank details. Only the main vendor information and the addresses are copied between databases. So if I save that away, do a lookup in EMEA, you'll see the Perfect Image Limited has been replicated through. And last, with the GL master triggers, any update done will be rolled through, but if we delete the vendor in Fabrikam, we will need to manually delete the vendor within the other companies. In the next video, we'll take a look at the combiner functions that are available in PSTL. In the last video, we took a look at using the master triggers within the Professional Services Tools library. In this one, we're going to take a look at the combiner functions. So if you open PSTL, there are multiple combiners available such as the vendor combiner, customer combiner, territory combiner, item combiner, or item site combiner. One we're going to use as an example today is the customer combiner. So if we select under Sales Tools, Customer Combiner, and click Next, we'll be given a prompt for starting customer number combined into customer number. So in this case, I'm going to find Hulling Communications Inc., select them, I'm going to combine them into Aaron Fitts Electrical. So operating on the assumption here that one customer has bought another. Just so we can ensure that the combine has actually worked, what I'm going to do is go into Sales and load in the customer's navigation list and just show the transactions for Aaron Fitts. As you'll see, there are 49 transactions on the system, 49 sales transactions. So what we're going to do is close that down, go back into the customer combiner and say convert. At this stage, we'll be reminded that we need to make a SQL Server backup of the company data before proceeding. It's always a good idea to do this before running any of the tools within PSTL. I did make a backup a few minutes ago, so in this case I'm just going to say continue. That'll process through in the background, and when finished it'll come back with a message telling us what's happened. So telling us that customer combine is finished. If we say OK and close that window, it'll come up with a TA Combined Customers report, which will send a screen. And it's just showing there that Hulling C 0001 has been merged into Aaron Fitt 0001. Close that down. And again, go and look at the transactions list. You'll see that we no longer have 49 transactions, but 55. If we refresh the list there, the other customers disappeared from the list because they've been merged in. The combiners work across all the different sections. So as another example, if we just quickly look at the sales territory. Territory 1, Territory 2, Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, Michigan. If we go into PSTL again, and select the territory combiner, say next. We can pick territory 2 and merge that into territory 1. We say convert and continue. Territory combiner is finished. We close the window again, we'll get the report off, telling us the territories have been merged together. And if we do a lookup, we'll now only have territory 1, and all the figures will have been merged together from territory 2 into territory 1. All of the combiners work in exactly the same way. So if you've had extra accounts created within the nominal ledger that you want to merge in with other codes, you can do that. Likewise, if one vendor buys another, you can merge the records together. So that brings us to the end of this section and to the end of this online learning course, Microsoft Dynamics GP Techniques.